What up, street dogs? There, Kim. It's a lovely day in Westerly, Rhode Island. Alright, so the thought. This one is on the whitewashing of society. So when you talk about whitewashing, what do you mean? So funny enough, actually this term was really popular when I was a kid. So for reference, I grew up in the Bay Area. I was born in 1988, and you know, growing up in Alameda, I went to Lincoln Middle School and stuff like that. And I swear, our school is like 80% Asian. And the thing that was so in vogue when I was a kid growing up, especially in the 90s, is this whole notion of AZN Pride, AZN, which is short for Asian Pride. Pride often stylized as PRYDE. And it was so funny because the whole notion of Asian pride or AZN pride was there was this deep and profound pride that, you know, Asian Americans had in being Asian, and the notion was to reject anything that was white, which is essentially the code word for Caucasian or like standard American. And it's kind of a little bit weird and funny because you know, Asian American, you know, us growing up as Asian American. I'm Korean American, by the way. I was born and raised in the Bay Area. So my mom is from Seoul, my dad's from Busan. I don't know. My mom's from Busan, my dad's from Seoul. And but you know, we all still grew up to like Saturday morning cartoons, Jackie Chan adventures, Warner Brothers, Animaniacs, and so forth. And so, you know, we all grew up to like Costco corn dogs and Saturday morning cartoons and stuff like that. So actually, if you think about most Asian American kids growing up in the 90s, like my age, and I'm just gonna speak in general for everybody. The general gist is we had so much pride in our Asian heritage. However, obviously a lot of things we do was American, right? And even the bias was, you know, we would call them FOBs, F-O-B, fresh off the boat. And it was essentially a derogatory term used to describe, you know, essentially kids who just came to the States, who were essentially born in Asia somewhere, whether it be Korea or China, and they came to America. And so, you know, they had like, you know, broken English or whatever. And it's kind of not it's really not a fair assessment to make, because, you know, Asian Americans essentially became kind of a distinct thing, but then yet we still do so much American things. And so even for myself, truth be told, you know, obviously I look Asian, and genetically I'm Korean, but I would say culturally and just who I am, I'm probably like 80 to 90% American and only 10 to 20% like Korean American, Asian American, and Confucian. Because essentially Korean culture is more of a Confucian culture, if anything. But anyways, so, you know, so the notion being whitewashed was to like, we'd always joke about this as kids, right? Like, you know, to be correct, like when you talk about the white kids, right? You're like, oh, you know, and then the reason why Asians call people white is because it's just baked into the language. Like, for example, in Korean, to call a white person is begin. Bek means white, in means person, and this is actually where Koreans are super racist too. The term for a black person is 흑인. 흑 literally means dirt person, 흑인. And so that's why Koreans are, you know, obviously very racist to African American people or people with a darker pigment than them. And I think even in I think either Cantonese or Mandarin, to talk about a white person is bak gwai. Bak means white. Gwai, it actually literally means white devil or white ghost or white spirit. And hak gwai, hak also means black, you know, black spirit, black ghost. So typically Asians, you know, I can't speak for all Asian people, but a lot of the traditional languages, and also Korean comes from a lot of Korean comes from Chinese, and it just a lot of racism baked into the language. But anyways, so expounding on this notion, you know, he's like, oh, you know, parts about like white culture, American culture, like being grounded, having your own bedroom, and then I think the South Asian Indian, I don't know if it's Indian, but Russell Peters had a lot of jokes about this, about like, you know, growing up Asian or South Asian or, you know, non-standard, you know, American in America, and, you know, things like, oh, you know, just like, once again, I think one of his favorite jokes is like, man, I got grounded and I got sent to my room. And then all the Asian kids go, you have your own room? It's just kind of like these kind of funny jokes. But anyways, so when I think about whitewashing, to me this actually doesn't come to ethnicity or race or whatever, because, you know, even me being Korean, I'm actually more pale and often more pigment white than a lot of my Caucasian friends. So I think when people say white, they mean to say, you know, standard, dominant, you know, the assimilated class, whatever it may be. And when I think about the whitewashing of society, what I mean to say is, essentially it's just a society that's just becoming more lame and watered down, and it's like you're taking bleach and you're kind of desensitizing, or you're making everything too sterile. So I don't want to live in a society that's too clean and too sterile. And actually, even one of my critiques, so I think Singaporean people are great, but the problem with Singaporean society is the society is just like, you know, it's funny because everyone's like middle class or upper middle class or rich. There's not that many like poor people in Singapore, yet everyone is like kind of like mediocrely miserable. Everyone feels mediocre and stuff like that, and I truth be told, I don't think I've ever met a happy Singaporean. They all have, you know, a safe society, and there's this quote is like, low crime doesn't mean no crime. So people say that Singapore is one of the safest places and in the planet. Probably it actually is true, but the downside of that is it just kind of makes life a little bit more boring, and so I would personally opt for a life that's more dangerous, more interesting, more risky than a life which is more safe and whitewashed and bleached over. And this is actually the subtle bias I'm trying to see too with you know, just effectively at this point Google and YouTube is the internet, and if you don't know, YouTube is owned by Google. So certainly, like, if 90% of the web traffic is being consumed by Google and YouTube, there is like this sort of digital hegemony that Google is the master, it's the leader, and we all must follow and obey. So now the negative consequence of all this is that people are afraid to speak their mind because it doesn't follow advertising guidelines and stuff like that. And I think even for me, the irony is because I intentionally choose not to monetize my YouTube, I think the algorithm shows my videos to fewer people because, you know, there's really no incentive for Google to do otherwise. And but at least the fun thing for me is for the most part at this point, I have enough racks in my bank account to sustain me for several lifetimes, and I effectively live like a super poor person, which means I have much more fidelity and control and autonomy and freedom over my personal life, so, and also my words, so I could really speak my mind. So, you know, love me or hate me or agree or disagree with me, at least I'm trying to tell you my personal truth, and I'm trying not to water it down. I'm just trying to really speak my mind and be as courageous as I can. And so this whitewashing of society means, yeah, fewer people sharing their opinions because everyone's so money hungry to just monetize their things. A lot of people, and also American society, there's, oh, you know, go against the grain, be a contrarian, blah, blah, but ain't nobody, like, I think that's all just fluff. That's all just marketing and branding. True America doesn't want Americans to be unique. They only want Americans to be unique and different, only from like this consumerist, materialistic perspective. Like, you know, you drive a Beamer, I drive a Mercedes, you drive a Lexus, I drive a, you know, a Subaru, whatever it may be. But society is not really encouraging people to really be a free spirit and speak their mind, because there's no way you can monetize that, right? Like if I decide to live like a degenerate, be totally detached from society, like ain't nobody can make money off me. So there's that bias against that. But anyways, so certain things too, I still never forget this. When I was in Berkeley at the Albany is just like a little bit north of Berkeley, where me and Cindy were living there in Berkeley when Cindy was finishing out her PhD. We're at the Whole Foods and I'm just talking with Cindy, and I think I was talking to the butcher or something, and it's like, oh, you know, you know, I said shit or fuck or something like that. And then there's like this random dude who's like, excuse me, there's children here, watch your mouth. He didn't say watch your mouth, but that's essentially what he meant. He's like, there's children here. And I'm like, wait, what kids? And then I look down, is like his son is like earmuffing the kid, you know, figuratively, right? And I think I might have been like, oh shit, oh fuck, my bad. But yeah, like even as his parents, right? Like, who are we to, you know, earmuffs our kids and try to make society much more whitewashed for them? And I think actually one of the things I'm most grateful for is that I had a pretty hard knock life, which means I saw all the bad, the good, the evil, everything in between in life, which kind of gave me a better gauge of society. It actually made me much more independent, because my sense of morals and right and wrong and my personal ethics was shaped not from being censored. Everything was uncensored. And I actually think that was a good thing. And more importantly was my mom gave me the tools of just, you know, how to act virtuously and not do stupid shit. And as a consequence, I think I was able to thrive a lot more as an individual, a thinker, an entrepreneur, and so forth. So for me, like my own personal endeavor for my future kids and my future children is to teach them to be courageous, to not censor themselves, to allowing their inner freak to come out, whatever it may be. And a lot of that is drawn from the fact that I personally hated when people try and censor me or say do this or don't do that and stuff like that. So I think typically us as parents, you're only ever going to treat your future kids or your kids the way you wish you were treated when you were a kid. And I mean, my mom was amazing. She's a saint in the flesh. But my only critique of my mom, or the shortcoming of my mom, was she was always just busy working her kind of like menial labor job, so she couldn't really supervise me as much. So I had zero adult supervision growing up, which is like good and bad too, because like I was like the ultimate free range kid, you know, just hanging out with the homies and stuff like that. But also there's obviously downsides, because, you know, if my mom was home more and, you know, not having to work all the time, you know, I could have gotten some other advantages and stuff like that. But once again, I think the whitewashing of society is, you know, you don't want to show the kids nudity or cussing or anything like that. So I always say, honestly, you know, maybe the best way to treat it is talk and engage with your kids like they're little adults, or talk to your kids and stuff like that like the way you would talk with your friends, and don't coddle them, don't you know. And also, like, I think I get this from Nassim Taleb too in terms of ethics. You know, don't treat your kids the way that you hated it when your parents treated you. And also the more robust one is treat your parents how you would like to be treated if your future children treat you when you're old and stuff like that. So just dynamic forms of ethics. And yeah, and what's the downside of whitewashing society? Society becomes more lame, more boring, less opinionated, and more mediocre. So this is an anti-mediocre society. A better society is uncensored and raw and allows the full gamut of human emotions.